Hello, and thank you everyone for joining us. My name is Parisa or Parisa Fatehi-Weeks, and I lead the ESG programs and partnerships team at Indeed. Today's World Environment Day, led by the United Nations Environment Program, which has been celebrated and held annually since 1973. Today's conversation that you've tuned in for is the third in a series of sessions on green jobs that we've had the privilege of hosting along with our partners at Jobs for the Future. Why are we talking about the climate economy and green jobs? If you're tuned in, you know the answer to this question. You know why this is important. Number one, the climate crisis is real. It's upon us. The emerging green economy is rapidly growing to meet the challenges we face. Number two, in the US, the federal government is making once in a generation investments to drive the transition to this economy and upgrade our energy sources and infrastructure. And number three, alongside this is an opportunity that all of us on this video today recognize that marginalized communities who have been most impacted by environmental injustices have both the most to gain and the most to lose in the transition of our economy. So today's focus is about the role that employers play in making this a win-win transition for the many green jobs that are emerging. I'm really thankful for the experts that are joining as panelists today. First, we have Taj Eldridge, Managing Director of Climate Innovation and Incubated Practice at JFF Labs. Crystal Bridgeman, Senior Director of Workforce Development Programs at Siemens Foundation. And Bo Delp, Executive Director of the Texas Climate Jobs Project. Really appreciate you all being here today. I'm going to start with you, Taj. In light of the recently released Morning Consult survey by JFF and the significant role that survey shows us that small and medium-sized employers play in job creation, can you start by telling us what are employers saying about their needs to develop a green pathway, and why are employers crucial in facilitating this just transition?
Parisa, thank you so much for number one hosting this with us and also asking this question. We did a recent survey a few months back where we polled over 800 Fortune 1000 businesses and asked this question around green jobs. And a lot of the feedback that we had was resounding. Over 80% of those respondents mentioned that there were two things they were interested in. Number one, understanding what are green jobs and how those green jobs impact their businesses. And also number two, about funding. How will they be able to not only train their existing workforce, but also prepare for the next generation of workforce that's there? I think this conversation about employers and the information we got from that survey is vastly important because a few things. Number one, what we don't want to do is revisit what happened a few of us know some years ago. We had a lot of people trained for jobs that didn't come to fruition. And so we need to have this connection between the supply and the demand. And the demand piece of that for us is really interesting because it's ever changing. I often say that we're in the adolescent phase of the green economy where jobs are going to be changing, the skills that are going to be changing as well. So I think on the other part of that is it's really kind of allowing the workforce providers to think about ways to think about this idea of lifelong learning. Think about this idea of having skills on top of skills for these jobs. So I think that's going to be really important for the future as you start thinking about the type of people that are prepared for those jobs and the type of businesses that are offering jobs in this space as well. But kind of going back to that piece, Parisa, I want to ask you a question as well on this end. And especially given Indeed's global presence, because this is a global issue that we love to talk about in this idea of the green workforce between employers and talent pools. What makes Indeed's focus on climate important for this? And what are the key partnerships and initiatives that Indeed is doing around this space around climate?
Yeah, thanks for asking and really leading the way in so much of this conversation globally. We are just one of the members of this global community, and we know we have a particularly unique role to play at Indeed because we really the sheer scale at which we operate. So we have over 350 million unique monthly visitors, over 245 million resumes folks using Indeed to connect with jobs, and over 3.5 million employers who use our platform to hire. So we want to be a positive force in the ecosystem of organizations that is really advocating for a just transition to this climate economy, and double down on our mission as a company, which is to help people get jobs. And in this moment, that means help people, especially the folks, like I said earlier, that have the most to gain, help them get good jobs that provide them with choice and economic mobility. And so for job seekers in particular, and the millions who use Indeed for that purpose, that means helping them actually understand which jobs are green jobs and helping them discover and connect and really showcase the skills that they have that make them well suited to get those jobs. And if not, to connect to the training opportunities, upskilling opportunities that they may be eligible for to step into those jobs. So we really, we have a huge role to play in that. And in particular, I think we can bring to bear the expertise that we've learned from our partners in working with job seekers who face the most bias and barriers, and make sure we're bringing those partnerships along into this moment. So whether that's working with job seekers who don't have college degrees, they may be skilled through alternative routes, they may be stars, or they may be folks who are impacted by the criminal legal system, but who are very ready for good jobs and have the aptitude to really be competent, qualified, and excellent at jobs. How do we make sure everyone is part of this equation? So very excited to be learning from folks like Jobs for the Future, Siemens Foundation, Texas Climate Jobs, to really contribute in the way that we can. So thank you for asking, Taj. And I want to continue to expand this conversation because we have so much to learn from each other. I'm going to bring Crystal in. And Crystal, I think there's a lot we'd love for you to add to this conversation, but I want to start with the Everyone Charging Forward program that Siemens Foundation and your team launched quite recently in 2023. Can you share some of well, first tell us about it, but also share some of the lessons that you all have learned from this initiative, the impact it's having on the ground, and maybe what other employers can learn from that experience?
Sure, it's my pleasure to do so. I'd also like to thank JFF and Indeed for including us and giving us the opportunity to share more about Everyone Charging Forward, the initiative launched at the end of 2023. And this is really just our attempt to look at what assets, resources, and knowledge we could bring to the table to advance equity in this clean energy economy that we know will be at least the next 10 years in terms of opportunities as well as developing and design. So for us, taking this kind of focused approach in one specific sector, get our feet wet and understand some of the challenges, we see really as an opportunity to create a template both for us and perhaps other foundations who want to understand how to support and engage without necessarily taking on the full ocean of issues. And I would say, the partnerships are at the heart of this initiative. We started first in Detroit, really working with organizations like EVITP and MUST, which do collaborations with unions and employers to ensure that new and diverse workers are really coming onto the construction sites, learning every aspect of construction while gaining their safety requirements. And we are supporting their wages while they're doing that work. So kind of the career readiness, early part of the pipeline, but with a recognition that you have to really provide them with the foundation of wages to keep them in the program. And then we are investing also with North Carolina, where we are learning about how the power of the governor's office, as well as vision setting, can provide a state strategy to support workforce in the EV world. So we really see those two both as kind of proxies for learning for other parts of the country, as well as kind of our laboratories of understanding where the challenges are and how those can be addressed. And finally, NGA and NLC recently launched their EV Workforce Collaborative, also part of our grant, serving as kind of a national platform to understand what are some of the common challenges, how can tools such as a national task force and working groups really begin to tackle those and then accelerate solutions. And then the final piece, which we launched back in April, is a new investment with Families and Workers Fund. Really to say that, we recognize that workers need these wraparound supports to reach conclusion. And as their executive director, Rachel, would say, life's hard. You really need to come alongside trainees and workers who are going through the program. So that's kind of where we are, and really looking forward to learning lessons from those partnerships and opportunities to really share and accelerate solutions for states and localities across the country.
One thing before I hand it back to you, you named so many others that you work with. I wondered if you could spell out who, especially for members of our global audience, NGA and NLC, so that they know. Yes.
My apologies. It's it's the curse of living in Washington, D.C. Everything comes down into an alphabet soup. So some of these partners that I threw out there, first is the Electrical Vehicle Infrastructure Training Program. They're currently the preferred provider and certification under the U.S. federal investments, particularly in transportation, for electricians to become skilled and certified in EV equipment, and particularly, across the board, but particularly with charging. And then we are also working in partnership with the National Governors Association and the National League of Cities, who are really kind of our partners building the national platform.
Thank you. I think so helpful so that others know they can look to those organizations as resources and potential partnerships as well. Back to you.
Thank you. I wanted to really kind of turn to Bo and hopefully get his perspective, especially from the work he's doing with the Texas Climate Jobs Project and understanding its mission and objectives. Bo, it'd be terrific too if you could help us understand more about how partnerships between unions, employers can really just accelerate growth and opportunity for both parties and change the landscape when it comes to equity. And if you have any ideas and thoughts around how those things can be scaled, we know that would be really powerful for the audience to understand. I'm throwing a lot of questions at you, but one more just to add to the running list, Bo. Knowing what it's like in terms of worker conditions, renewable energy presence in Texas. We know that Texas isn't the only one where these things are happening. So if you have any kind of lessons learned for other states or stakeholders from what you've gone through thus far, I'm sure they would find that very valuable.
Sure. Well, I think those are all great questions, and I would love to try to address them. Texas as many of you know, is considered the energy capital of the country. And historically, that has meant oil and gas. And many families have provided for themselves and those they care for with very rewarding careers in the oil and gas industry. But Texas also leads the country in carbon emissions. And as the state transitions, there are significant challenges, but also incredible opportunities, not just for the state of Texas, but nationally. Keep in mind, in the state of Texas, there's more solar being installed here than any other any other state in the country. And in addition, there's more wind energy that exists in Texas than all but 4 countries on Earth. And so while there are these legacies around oil and gas, there's also exciting opportunity. But we need to dig into what kind of jobs are going to be created here. The reality is, under the Inflation Reduction Act alone, $66 billion is going to be flowing into Texas by 2030 to create all kinds of jobs in renewable energy, building retrofitting, and supply chain operations and maintenance jobs. But we need to ask, what kind of jobs are those going to be? And as you alluded to, Crystal, there are many challenges here in Texas and across the country that workers face in the climate economy. Here in Texas, a construction worker is killed on the job once every 3 days, according to OSHA. And here in Texas, it's the only state in the country that doesn't require any form of workers' compensation insurance coverage. We also see BLS and Department of Labor tell us that women and Black and brown workers are consistently paid less, sometimes tens of thousands of dollars less a year than white workers. And so we have deep racial and income disparities here in Texas and across the U.S. that we need to address. So we have big choices to make about what job quality is going to look like in this growing economy, not just in construction, but in maintenance, and also thinking about how to transition so many people that have spent their entire career powering a coal power plant or working in a refinery. How do we ensure that those individuals maintain their union, maintain their high wages, their access to healthcare and retirement that allows them to retire with some dignity? So it's incredibly exciting across the country, whether we're talking about solar and wind, offshore wind, whether we're talking about things like green hydrogen or carbon capture, geothermal. All of these new industries and growing industries represent opportunities to have a conversation about job quality. So let me tell you what we're doing. We're working really hard to expand access to registered apprenticeship program for disadvantaged communities. Registered apprenticeship is the gold standard when it comes to workforce development in the construction industry. And we know that individuals can gain access to those programs. They're not charged tuition. They actually earn while they work. And when they graduate from that apprenticeship program, they have access to decent wages, affordable health care, and retirement. The other thing that we need to talk about, whether it's oil and gas workers transitioning into industries like hydrogen or geothermal or carbon capture, or in the construction industry, retrofitting buildings or building solar and wind, is we need to talk about people's access to unions. We know that unions, the data is very clear that unions help close many of the racial and income disparities that exist in the market. We also know that unionized workplaces are safer workplaces. The data is consistent on this fact. And so whether it's a worker installing solar panels in the hot Texas summer, or an operations worker that's dealing with green hydrogen, which can be very explosive, the union allows them to have a process to spot unsafe working conditions and resolve them collaboratively. So I think that there are all kinds of really big questions that we have to ask ourselves about these big federal investments and how the jobs they're going to create. But we have to push it beyond just job creation and think about job quality. So Parisa, we'd love to get you back in on the conversation as well. I've been really struck by the conversation so far, and just thinking about the contours of the conversation and the climate economy and all these jobs that are going to be created through these really historic climate investments across the country. And I think my question to you, Parisa, is, what do you think the private sector can do to elevate conversations around job quality, access to registered apprenticeship, access to unions, and safer work sites in some of these clean energy industries?
I'm so glad you asked that question, because really it's something that undergirds so much of our work to fulfill the commitments we've made publicly to our shareholders, to other companies, and to our clients. And so it's foundational, really, to how we do that. And if I maybe just a moment of background, when I say we've made these commitments, part of it is that Indeed has in 2021 publicly said that we commit to a series of goals by the year 2030. One of them is around environmental sustainability and achieving net zero by 2030. Another one is about helping 30 million job seekers who face bias and barriers get hired by 2030. And there are others, but we are diligently measuring and reporting on these publicly each quarter, including, like I said, to investors and shareholders. And your question about how job quality lies at the intersection of this work is exactly where we wanted this conversation to go. Because if we were to do and fulfill each of those commitments in a silo, I'm not sure not only would we not take advantage of the intersectional opportunity here, I think we would potentially take steps backward. And so as we look at creating more jobs and hires for job seekers facing barriers, we want to see, and when we say, by the way, job seekers facing barriers, we talk a lot about folks who face barriers like impacts of the criminal legal system, potentially not having formal four-year degrees, folks who may have accessibility or have disabilities, racial injustices, discrimination, and the like. The list could go on, but these are the very folks who, if we just stop at getting a hire without thinking about the economic mobility, the benefits, the pay, the worker voice embedded in each of these jobs, I'm not sure we will have moved the needle in the way that this moment presents as an opportunity. And so very much see it as an intersection. And if I'm fully candid, I think we're at the beginning of the journey about how to even equip more of both the employers and the job seekers at the table with transparent information that enables them to make the choice that provides economic mobility. And so this conversation is timed very well to highlight how important that is. And I do want to say that we at Indeed are trying to walk the walk, so that when we are telling other employers to adopt some of these best practices, we are coming from a place of humility and sharing lessons learned and what we aren't doing as well as we want to yet. So for example, we talk about making jobs more accessible to underrepresented groups. That means in our own case, we removed college degree requirements from over 700 job profiles at Indeed, so that we could lower the barriers to entry into our own workforce. We also set up, you talked about apprenticeships. We think there's gold there if we could help more employers know about what wins apprenticeships present to everybody in the equation. And at Indeed, we just launched something called Boost, which is an internal apprenticeship program for now that we hope to grow. But it's about getting folks who are underrepresented and are not currently in technology or technical roles from some parts of our team into technical roles. So really excited about what lessons we learned from that new apprenticeship program we've established, and hoping that we can help bring other employers along. So lots to learn and lots to still pick up steam on. We're just at the beginning of this journey, I think. This is where we actually get to do a quick lightning round as we near the end of our brief conversation. And I want to just fire a few rapid questions at each of you so that folks watching at home are able to take away your key learning. So I'm going to turn to Crystal first. If you had a magic wand, what, according to you, would be the biggest contributor to green jobs and green opportunities that employers could scale?
Yeah, I think, I'd love to have a magic wand, by the way. Tell me if anybody knows where to get one. I think that if where we are now, as we're kind of beginning on the journey of understanding what a clean economy, especially clean energy, is going to look like, for employers who might be a little kind of confused about what's happening, really thinking about what we know works in workforce development, things like registered apprenticeships, things like pre-apprenticeship, looking at models where there's evidence and really kind of considering how they can make that happen. So not all employers are going to have the capacity or resources to do that, especially small and medium. And so really looking at where there's some existing industry sector partnerships committed to proven practices like registered apprenticeship, or youth apprenticeship. That's something that we're very involved in as well. So trying not to become overwhelmed by things that they don't know, by turning to things they do know, and building in and looking for those existing sector partnerships and ecosystems. The other thing I would say is that given what we know right now about the labor market as well as the future, this is an all hands on deck situation, right? So we need workers from every walk of life who may have been left out of the equation before. They need to be part of the equation now if we're going to succeed and reach our national goals around climate change, as well as our economic goals nationally and regionally. So, for employers to achieve their own goals, they're going to have to look at, really the whole of America and understand where they're not pulling talent from, how they can invest in them, particularly those underrepresented communities, and how they can support them coming on board into the clean economy. So those would be kind of my initial kind of thoughts and takeaways as we look to scaling.
Yeah, I'm hearing you. All hands on deck. Partner. Bo, what would you say is the most important message you want folks to hear on this call today?
What I would say is the most important message is that we don't have a shortage of workers in the climate economy. What we do have is a shortage of good jobs in the climate economy. And I think that I would want everyone to understand that if we begin to have a serious conversation about access to registered apprenticeship, prioritizing that, as well as things like affordable healthcare and retirement, we have an opportunity to create a win-win. And that means that we can help reduce carbon emissions. We can create new industries. Companies can thrive. And we can make sure that workers, whether they're installing solar panels or in the operations and maintenance of the offshore wind supply chain, have an opportunity to benefit and share in the prosperity of these new climate economies. I think that's something that most reasonable people can get behind. We have an incredible opportunity with the Inflation Reduction Act and the amount of language in that legislation that talks about job quality. So I would want everyone to understand that we have this opportunity to build on as a foundation. We have a lot of work left to do, but this really gives us something to come together and work collaboratively on to make sure that everybody walks away a winner, including our planet.
Who doesn't want a win-win? I'm in. Okay, Taj, I'm coming to you as we wrap this discussion today. Would love to just hear your reflections. You are all over this issue in so many different angles, and Can you just revisit for us what some of the core objectives and wins for you are at the end of this conversation?
Yeah, definitely. But first, Parisa, I want to just thank you again for being the host and for this series that we've done in the last couple of weeks. And I think for us, what we've seen between this conversation here that talks about employers to the previous conversation what we had with partners such as the Industrial Commons and Terra.do and World Resources Institute, even to our beginning one that we talked about with the Brookings Institute and Family Workers Fund. What we realize is that it takes the power of us to really move this thing forward. It can't just be on the backs of employers. It can't just be on the back of consumers, on philanthropies, or those organizations. We need to have to come together and ensure that we're moving this thing forward. And as Bo said, that we can have this ending result for the climate and our planet. And so I think that's the most important piece of that we've seen in this conversation and previous conversations we had before. And I just want to definitely thank you and have the audience also think about ways to partner with any of the folks that's been in these series, ourselves or indeed as well, to move this thing forward.
Beautiful, beautiful. Yeah, I think that's exactly right, which is this is really an invitation to jump in if you're not already in the fray on this transition to a green economy. And if you already are, bring along others, educate, share your lessons. Because what I heard from Crystal and Taj and Bo is no one of us can do this alone. We've got to lock arms and do it together. And there are no dumb questions here. So if you're curious about apprenticeships, if you're curious about what are the regional tables, what does Bo mean when he says registered apprenticeships? Ask us, ask others, because this is a moment that will not present itself in a long time. So thank you all for sharing what you've already learned and bringing others along, and looking forward to working with you further. Have a great day.